You're listening to The Murder in My Family, brought to you by AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to check out some of the other great true crime podcasts from this network, including Missing Persons, DNA ID, Scene of the Crime, Zodiac Speaking,
Beyond Bizarre True Crime,
Citizen Detective,
and Campus Killings.
All of these podcasts are available for you to binge on right now, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe where you're listening to this podcast so you don't miss an episode.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast do not necessarily represent those of the podcast, its host, or sponsors. If you would like to discuss the murder in your family on this podcast, please be sure to visit themurderinmyfamily.com for more information. This episode may contain unsettling material or subject matter. Listener discretion is advised.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of The Murder in My Family. I'm your host, Mike Morford.
In this episode, we'll discuss the tragic case of a young Florida mother who lost her life at the hands of the father of her child before he took his own life. Horribly, their son was there to witness this unspeakable violence, and this tragedy has left many asking, could this have been prevented?
We'll dive into this case after some quick housekeeping. Independent podcasts like this one depend on word of mouth to bring in new listeners. So if you find that you enjoy this show, please take a moment to rate and review it wherever you listen to your podcast. And be sure to introduce a friend to the show and invite them to listen. With your help, The Murder in My Family can continue to grow and reach a new audience. To learn more about the show or the cases we discuss, please visit themurderinmyfamily.com. You can also find us on Twitter with the handle @MurderMyFam or on Facebook at facebook.com/TMIMF podcast.
If you'd like to support The Murder in My Family and get VIP access to things like ad-free listening, early preview episodes, and bonus content of not only this show, but for every other podcast on the AbJack network of indie podcast, consider subscribing to the show with an AbJack Insider subscription through Apple Podcast. For only $4.99 a month or $49.99 a year, you'll unlock a variety of listener benefits, and you'll be supporting the show in the process. Your support is greatly appreciated.
And thank you to all of the supporters that generously donate to help keep the show growing and improving. One last note. Please support any of the sponsors that you hear on The Murder in My Family, the way that those sponsors support the show. It's with our sponsor support that this show can go on and continue to provide a platform to share these stories with you in every episode. Thank you. And now on with the show.
Leslie Rodriguez, called Little Les by her friends and family, was born on December 21st, 1994. She's been called an exemplary mother. She loved dancing and cheerleading and was a huge fan of the Dallas Cowboys. Her most recent talent was manicuring nails. Her genuine positivity and loving personality was missed by all who knew her. She was always smiling and loved to make people laugh. She was described as a walking ray of sunshine and is missed dearly by her friends and family. What happened to Leslie is an all-too-familiar tale, one that happens too often. She died in a domestic violence incident at the hands of the father of her child, a man that was supposed to care for Leslie and protect her. Instead, after wrestling with demons he took Leslie's life and then his own. The aftermath left two families devastated and one young child without his parents. And heartbreakingly, the young boy witnessed the violence, but thankfully he wasn't physically harmed. But who knows what long-term effects he'll suffer or trauma he experienced as a result of what he went through. Leslie met Devin Griggs and the two hit it off. Devin was handsome and an athletic ex-football player. He had gone to college and was in the military. Leslie's mom, Eileen, who's my guest today, found Devin to be polite and respectful. She was happy for her daughter. Before long, Leslie and Devin were an item, and they soon found out that they were going to be parents. Although there was no thought-out or long-term plan for Leslie and Devin's relationship, they both agreed that they wanted to be good parents to their new son, who they named Roman. When Roman was born, Leslie adapted naturally and quickly to motherhood, and her family was there to support her and little Roman. While Leslie was an independent and hard worker, we all know that having family there to help with a young child is invaluable. But Leslie was living in South Florida, and her mom Eileen, who she was very close with, was living in Chicago. Leslie and Devin co-parented, And while Leslie was okay to take the relationship with Devin slowly and casually, Devin seemed to want to be in a relationship with Leslie and be more than co-parents. Leslie tried to make a relationship with Devin work, even moving away to Texas with him. But once they got there, Leslie seemed to feel isolated. She found herself missing her family even more, and worse, Devin seemed to treat her unkindly. He made her walk place to place instead of driving her. Leslie noticed other changes in Devin. He began to display signs of PTSD or perhaps mental illness. He seemed paranoid and talked about people watching him. The changes in Devin were too much to handle, and she decided to take young Roman back to Florida. Leslie didn't tell Eileen everything. Perhaps she didn't want her mom to worry, but she was concerned enough with the situation to head back to Florida. Devin, as far as is known, never physically abused Leslie, but some aspects of the way he interacted with her and treated her were an issue. Eileen wouldn't find out until it was too late that things were not well between Leslie and Devin. Back in Florida, Leslie was enjoying time with her young son and was planning on her future, perhaps training to be a nurse. To support Leslie and Roman and to be closer to them, Eileen and Leslie's stepfather sold their home in Chicago and moved to Florida. It should have been the beginning of a good period for the family. Unfortunately, Devin wasn't doing well, and he was spiraling. He had gone AWOL from his military service and made his way to Florida. His paranoia was worse, but to that point, he had never shown any propensity for violence or self-harm, so perhaps there were no glaring warning signs of what was to come. On May 9, 2022, Leslie was at her apartment with Roman in the Park East Apartments off Goldenrod Road in Orlando. Devin showed up at the apartment, and Leslie let him inside. We don't fully know what happened or what was said between Leslie and Devin, but what we do know is that police received a 911 call from a man who said that he had just killed his girlfriend and was going to take his own life. Deputies responded to the scene, but the door was locked and no one answered from inside, so they had to break the door down to get in. At around 8:25 p.m., deputies found 28-year-old Devin Griggs and 27-year-old Leslie Rodriguez inside the apartment, both dead from gunshot wounds. They quickly determined this was a murder-suicide. Also inside was the couple's young son, Roman, physically unharmed. He had his mother's blood on him, and there's no way to even imagine what this little boy witnessed on that terrible day. The Department of Children and Families arranged care for him that night. Not far away, Leslie's grandmother got repeated calls from a number she didn't recognize. She finally answered to see who was calling, and Devin's family broke the news to her that Devin and Leslie were dead, and that Devin had used a gun he owned to end their lives. The news was devastating for Leslie's grandmother, and she was hysterical. Eileen desperately tried to figure out what had happened, and when she got on the phone with Devin's family, they gave her the same devastating news, that Leslie was dead, killed at Devin's hands. Eileen had come to Florida to be closer to her daughter, and now she had to make funeral arrangements for her. Leslie's loss was immeasurable. People that knew and loved her were shocked and saddened that her young life was cut short in such a tragic and violent way. Scores of friends and family attended her funeral service, and as much pain as Eileen was in over the loss of her daughter, she was touched by the outpouring of love and support from those that knew Leslie. In the aftermath of this tragedy, a big question remained. Could this have been prevented? Were there warning signs that were missed? Amongst all these questions, Eileen had to deal with the process of getting full custody of little Roman. It was clear that as much as the adults in Leslie's life were hurting, this little boy was too. He missed his parents, and undoubtedly had questions, and will surely have more as he gets older. He's also going to need the support of his family to deal with the horrible reality of what he witnessed, the violent deaths of his parents. Eileen plans to be there to give him the love and support that he needs, and she too has become active in various support groups. It's been a year and a half since this tragedy, and Eileen is trying to deal with all the pain that this has brought into her life. She sat down to talk with me about this heartbreaking tragedy, and that conversation is coming up in just a moment. If you or someone you know is struggling with thoughts of suicide, you can call or text the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988. There's also a live chat on 988lifeline.org. Veterans can also reach out to the Veterans Crisis Line responder. To text, send a message to 838-255. And if you or someone you know needs help escaping from a domestic violence situation, visit thehotline.org or call 800-799-SAFE. This episode is sponsored by EarnIn. If you've gone shopping at all lately, it's hard not to notice. Prices have been going up. Many of us have struggled or had to scale back on purchases, or maybe take things out of the cart at the store. I know that's happened to me. Thankfully, there's help available to make that paycheck stretch a bit further and get the money you earned in your pocket a little faster. And that help is EarnIn. Life doesn't happen bi-weekly, so why should payday? The money you earn can be in your hands today with EarnIn. EarnIn is an app that gives you access to your pay as you work, up to $100 per day or up to $750 per pay period. Just download the EarnIn app and verify your paycheck. Then access up to $100 a day as you work and leave an optional tip. Any money you access plus tips are automatically repaid from your next paycheck. Whether I want to fill up my gas tank to go on one of my daughter's soccer games 2 hours away or catch up on some grocery shopping, EarnIn is there to help. Make EarnIn a part of your financial routine and join EarnIn's over 3.5 million customers who say things like, "When I think about EarnIn, I think about financial stability and security. It gives me a lot of peace of mind." Download EarnIn today, spelled EARNIN, in the Google Play or Apple App Store. When you download the EarnIn app, type in My Family under Podcasts when you sign up. It'll really help out the show. Once again, type My Family under Podcast when you sign up for the EarnIn app. Subject to your available earnings, location, daily max, and pay period max. See earnin.com/TOS for details. EarnIn is a financial technology company, not a bank. Bank products are issued by Evolve Bank and Trust, member FDIC.
Welcome to the Murder in My Family, Eileen. I want to thank you for coming on to discuss your daughter's, Leslie's, case with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. This is a very terrible saga that you've been through, that your family's been through, and I've was reading some of the details and just tragic all the way around. There's no good outcomes here. And we're going to talk about obviously what happened, but before we do, and we talk about what's happened in the aftermath, can you talk a little bit about Leslie herself and what she was like, and maybe share some of your memories of her?
Well, Leslie was, just to give you a little bit from, the beginning of her life when she came into the world. She was born December 21st of 1994. So she was pretty much the family's Christmas present that year. She was born in the middle of a snowstorm in Vineland, New Jersey. And immediately people were just completely drawn to her from day one. She just had this aura about her where people, anyone, we would go to the store, anywhere we were at, whether it's, the store, a theme park, or just a regular park, people just loved her. They would just come up to her and just wanted to hold her. And it was, I don't know, it's just something really special that she just had this magic about her where she drew people in, and when she drew them in, they stayed. They felt almost accepted, which is kind of weird, being such a young, having that power, for lack of a better term, such a young age, but that's how she was. And even growing up throughout her preteen, through her elementary years, through her preteen years, teenager, into her young womanhood, that's how she was. She had hundreds and hundreds of friends. There were probably close to 700 people that attended her services, just because that's how loved she was. She was active, very athletic. She was involved in everything and everything, very creative, and she could come up with a costume, in the blink of an eye, basically. She, very helpful, very accommodating, very affectionate. She most definitely her friends, what they loved about her was that she was a great listener. She, they would call her and just simply tell her, hey, I just need somebody to talk to. And she would sit there and listen for hours. And people just loved that about her. And if they wanted her advice, she would not, just provide whatever she felt. And for the most part, most of them would take her advice and it would work out for them. And so, she's, we call her our forever sunshine because she was definitely the light of our world. She just, I don't want to sound cliche, but she was that one person that when she walked into a room, she lit up the room. Her smile was just magnificent. And like I said, she just had this thing where she just drew people to her. And, she was just an amazing person and very giving, loved to help everyone, was always ready and willing, and very dependable. And I think that that was something that a lot of us we miss today because she was not a no person. She was a yes person and would always receive and give and accept everyone, no matter who they were, no matter their lifestyle, no matter their color, no matter their religion, nothing. She just saw them as as a person. She didn't see them as anything else. And very special. She growing up, like I said, she was involved in everything. I mean, she did flag football, she did tennis, she did gymnastics, cheerleading, dancing, you name it, she was involved. And then when she went on to, she graduated high school and went on to college, she just blossomed there as well. She wasn't as involved in activities and extracurricular activities, but she had really set goals for herself and was, was just preparing herself to accomplish them. And so yeah.
Yes. So you're speaking glowingly of your daughter, and obviously, as a mom, that mother-daughter bond that you've lost is still there. And it sounds like somebody with that much light and that much energy that your daughter had, that's obviously being missed by everyone in her circle.
Oh yes, most definitely. Her friends, her male friends, her female friends, they've all become bonus children to me pretty much. Uh, just because they, when they come around, they just speak so highly of her and they just all miss her so much. And I think that maybe uh, for both of us, it's a therapy. When I see her friends and I see what they're accomplishing and I see how they're progressing in life and moving forward and moving on and doing the adult things, yes, it hurts a little bit because of course I would want that's what I wanted for her. But on the other side of it, I know that if she were still here, she would be there with them every step of the way. And when I hear them about her in that positive light and no one had a bad thing to say about her, it's just, it makes me proud. It makes me very proud that she was my daughter. It makes me very proud that she was the young woman that she was. And yes, it's very missed because of course it just we want the good ones to stay, right? And she was a very, very good one that was taken away from us at such a young age. So
So as an adult, she has a relationship with this man, Devin Griggs. Now I'm thinking myself as a parent, anyone that would be dating my kids, I'm going to be scrutinizing and looking at closely. And what were your impressions of him and their relationship? Did you see anything there that, maybe put you off or
you were worried about, or did they seem to have a good relationship?
Well, they started dating in high school. So I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was either 2010 or 2011. I believe she was a sophomore and he was a junior in high school. He graduated 2012, she graduated 2013. And my first impression of him, I had actually invited him to her 17th surprise birthday party because she had just mentioned and had brought to my attention that she had been dating someone from school. And, she really wanted me to meet him. She really, really liked him. And when I met him, I was very impressed. I thought that he was a great guy. I thought that he was um, very intelligent and very well mannered. He was handsome. One of the good qualities was that he was very handsome. And so, I was proud of her. I was proud that she was actually what appeared to be in a good relationship. And he seemed to really want to take care of her. Whenever she was sick, he was there. She had had a few minor surgeries, and he would come over and take care of her so that I wouldn't have to miss work. It just seemed like he was always ready and willing and available to be there for her. And of course, as a mom, I asked the 20 questions and what are your plans? What is this? What are you wanting to do with your life and your future, and so on and so forth. And it just seemed like he gave all the right answers. And, as time went on, and for the most part, we thought, our family was just like, oh, yeah, this is just like a puppy love high school thing. It's not going to go, too far. And to our surprise, he moves to Tampa to go to college, I believe he went to USF, and she followed. And I believe that in Tampa, and I believe that was like in 2014 or so, 2013, 2014. And when she made that move, she was happy, she was excited, she was going to start going to school. She went to Hillsborough Community College over there, and she seemed to be good. They really seemed to be doing well together. They really seemed to be helping each other out, motivating each other, progressing together, and not only as individuals, but as a couple. And so that was one of the most important things, right? Because I wanted to make sure that even though they were living together, but that they both understood that just because they were living together doesn't mean that, life or school gets put on a back burner. Like, you have to continue going. This is not just about partying. You have to continue to push and progress and grow. And not sure what happened. I believe he graduated USF, and it just seemed like they were doing great. And then I wasn't really aware of much. I learned about a lot of the issues that they were having after incident, due to her friends coming to me and telling me what had happened. But it seemed like he graduated USF and just didn't know what to do with himself. And at that point, my daughter had found out that she was pregnant, and he decided that he was going to go into the military, and he joined the U.S. Army. And so, we thought, well, okay, she's pregnant, he's leaving. And for a minute, we thought that she was actually going to wind up leaving with him once he was done with boot camp and all of that, and that they were probably going to get married. And and then she told me, she said, no, Mom, we weren't even together. It was just one of those things that happened, and I wound up getting pregnant. And but he's gonna do his life, and I'm gonna do my life, but we're gonna co-parent, and he's gonna support the baby, and so on and so forth. And so it was great because even though I didn't want her to be a single mom, but I was a single mom myself, and I had the support of my family and friends. And she knew that she was going to have the support from her family and her friends and everyone. And she was just doing great. I mean, she really was doing great. She had a job, she had her own place. The baby was born prematurely, and but she really, really took on that mother role. She didn't care about going out and partying and all that stuff. She dedicated her time to the baby. And so, you know, like I said, I mean, I just feel like they were doing well. And whenever I would see him, he was like a son to me. And I would see him and he would come to me and give me a hug and, Mom, how are you? And how are you doing? And so on and so forth. And you know, and even though they weren't together, but he really showed that he continued to care for her and that he continued to care for the baby and be that father, as much as he could, right? Because being in the military, he had gone off to Korea. So there was a time there where he wasn't able to see the baby and stuff like that. And he actually left to boot camp the same day that the baby was born. So, which was December 28th of 2016. And, it just, I think there were red flags there. I myself was not aware because, of course, my daughter was not sharing everything with me, and which I expect because as a parent, I'm sure you know that your children do not share every single thing that happens in their life, right, with the parents. And a part of it could have been that she was ashamed. A part of it could have been just that she didn't want to talk about it. Honestly, I don't know. But hearing it from her friends after the fact, I do realize then that there were many red flags. And I think she was just hoping that that maybe the military would have helped him, would have fixed him or something, and that then things would have gotten better. And she decided to move back to Orlando. She got another great job in her place and so on and so forth. And like I said, she was being a single mom, doing great. And he kept insisting that he wanted to work things out with her. At this time, he's stationed in San Antonio, Texas. And he really emphasized that he wanted to work things out. And so she packed up her stuff, left her job, and followed him to Texas. And I think that was the beginning of the end. That's how I see it. Things were starting to get really bad. He was not physically abusive with her that I'm aware of. And from what I hear, he was not physically abusive with her, but he was very mentally and emotionally abusive. Unfortunately, my daughter had to depend on him while she lived there and didn't have a car and things like that. And he would use that to his advantage. And it started with little things like, well, I'm not going to pick you up from work. You're going to have to walk home. And or you're going to have to find a ride or something like that. She worked at a daycare. The baby was with her. And he would go pick up the baby early. Like she would get off at 6 and he would pick up the baby maybe like at 2:30, 3 o'clock. And then send her a text message or call her and say, hey, you need to walk home. I'm not picking you up. And it was just like little things like that. It was almost like he was never officially diagnosed, but it was almost like he was bipolar. Like one minute he was fine and then the next minute he wasn't. And it just continued. And I think it just got worse and worse and worse. And it was to the point where she was calling me now and crying and saying, Mom, I can't do this. I can't stay here. He left for the weekend. He left me here by myself. I haven't heard from him. I can't go anywhere. The baby doesn't have food, doesn't have milk because we were supposed to go grocery shopping and he just disappeared. I don't know where he's at. So it was those little things that started happening. He became very recluse. became very depressed. There was an incident where I believe he left hiking or something to the mountains for a weekend during his birthday, and he came home and she asked him, "Hey, where were you? Are you okay?" And he basically told her, like, F off. You don't need to know anything about me. You don't need to know where I'm at. You don't question me type of attitude. And like I said, I think that was the start. Her move was the beginning of the end. And she started realizing, like, I can't stay in this relationship. This is not healthy. And whenever she would call me, she would ask me to talk to him because I think she felt like I was the one person that he would listen to. And I would talk to him and I would ask him what was going on. And, sometimes he would shut down. And then a couple of days later, he would send me a text message and say, "Hey, can we talk? Can I give you a call?" And he would call me and tell me whatever he felt was going on. And I would just give him some advice and just say, maybe you need to get some help. Maybe you're suffering from something. I don't know. I mean, I have mental issues, mental health issues that runs in my family. So, but he just he just started doing, like I said, just doing things that were just not I don't want they just weren't normal. They just weren't normal. It was almost as if he loved her, but he was angry and disgusted by her at the same time. And it never really came to fruition as to what exactly drove him to that. There were times when he was questioning if the baby was his, and he did, they wound up doing like 2 or 3 paternity tests and they all came back positive, but he still had that doubt. And so again, she just got to that point. She calls me up and she says, "Mom, I need to go." And at the time, my husband and I, we were living in Chicago. And I said, "Okay, be ready by Memorial Day. I'm going to go pick you up, have all your stuff packed up, whatever you're planning to bring. And you're moving back to Chicago with us." And so that's exactly what happened. And she lived with us from May to about August of 2021. And she decided, I'm going to go back to Orlando. That's where she felt like this was her home. Orlando was her home. She felt that here, my mom was here. She had her friends, more family. It's familiar to her. And so she moved back and again, got a vehicle, got a great job, got her own place. It was almost like she found herself and her empowerment all over again. She found her strength and knew, I'm going to be a single mom, but I can do this. There's nothing that's going to stop me. She was looking into enrolling into nursing school, and she was getting her matters in order for that. And then she found her place, moved into her apartment, and we came to find out that he had gone AWOL in February of 2022. And she just happened to find out through a text message that she had sent to him. And he just said, "Well, I'm here. Bring the baby to me." And she was just like questioning, like, "What? What are you doing here?" And it was left at that. And then fast forward to March, we put our house on the market in Chicago. And of course, this is now, after COVID and post-COVID. And so we sold our home immediately. Thankfully, we were able to sell our home immediately. And my husband and I, but more myself, we wanted to move back to Orlando to be next to family. My mom had gotten very sick during COVID, and my brother-in-law, he was also very sick. And so we came to the realization we need to be close to family. We moved here April 15th of 2022 is when we arrived to Orlando. And it was just great. It was Good Friday. We celebrated Easter. We had a great time. it was just we were creating memories. We were beginning to create new memories, and that was the whole purpose. That was what we wanted to do.
So it sounds like you're there supporting her. You basically have picked up to move close to family. Part of that family is her, the baby. She's got you now there to help, to give her support. She's in a good place, but in the background you have Devin that's AWOL and sort of nearby. What were their interactions during this time like? Was he calling her? Were they seeing each other? Was he allowed to see the baby? What was going on between them?
Well, once he was picked up and sent back, he was actually discharged from the military on April 4th of 2022, which coincidentally is his birthday, happened to be his birthday. And he came back, and again, like I said, when we moved, I happened to see him because he came to pick up the baby for something. I think it was karate or something like that. And I asked him, I said, "Oh, what are you doing here?" And he kind of like laughed it off. I knew something was not right, but he kind of laughed it off. And he just said, "Oh, no, I'm just taking a little break." That's what he said. And I said, "Okay, no problem, no worries." My husband is former military, so of course I'm aware of a few rules and things and stuff. And my daughter then, since I asked her about it, and she says to me, she says, "Mom, I can't tell you the situation. It's not my place. He needs to tell you if he wants to tell you." So I said, "Okay." I reached out to him on Easter just to say, Happy Easter. And something in his reply, I could just tell that something was off. And he just didn't seem to be, it's almost like I could hear him speaking through his text message. And his reply was simply, "Happy Easter. I will see the baby later." That was it. But it was the way that it came. I don't know. It was something about the way that it came across. It was almost like very cold, like he was annoyed. And I asked my daughter, I said, "Hey, did you guys get into an argument or something?" And she's like, "No, I just, I believe at this point also she was done. I mean, once she left Texas, she was done with him. And I believe at this point she just felt like, you know what, I can't do this anymore. Like, there were some issues with child support payment because of course now he's no longer in the military, so he has no income. And so that started kind of becoming an issue. He wanted to get back with her, and she made it quite clear to him that no, that she was not going to do it. She was noticing some issues because he kept telling her that the government was watching him, that he could hear people talking, like if he was on a phone call, that he could hear like some background noise, like, and he knew that they were watching him and that they were following him. And so he became very paranoid with the government, quote unquote. And she would tell him, "Get the help, and we can, after you get the help, and I see that you've made some changes and that things have gotten better with you, because you need to fix you and take care of you before you can take care of us, um, we can talk about maybe a possible reconciliation." And he just could not take that. He just couldn't take that for nothing. He wanted her to be with him, and she just was not having it, basically. And so, fast forward, we have Mother's Day, and this is May 8th of 2022. And there were a few issues that were happening in between then. So let me backtrack about 2 weeks. So we got here again, like I said, April 15th is when we arrived. And that following week, she was just not doing well. Her blood pressure was through the roof. I mean, where they were sent home from work, she was going to the ER. And this was for about a good, I would say, 8 days, where she just she couldn't function. And I kept asking her, like, Leslie, what's wrong? What's going on? What is causing this? You're only 27. You should not be having blood pressure issues at such a young age. And she would just say, I don't know, Mom. I don't know. I'm just stressed out. I'm just stressed out. And I was like, and I knew there was something, but I just I just couldn't pinpoint exactly what was going on. And looking back now, I just wondered if he had threatened her or said something about the baby to her that she just felt like, she was afraid, but wasn't willing to share that information, especially with me, because she knew how I was, and she knew that if he was threatening her in any way possible, that something was going to be done about it, and it wasn't going to be pretty. And so like I said, I mean, there was just a lot of, I think there was just the constant looking back at her text messages. I mean, I scrolled through her text messages and read pretty much every one, and he would blame her. He was blaming her. He was blaming her for leaving Texas, and he was blaming her for his family, quote unquote, falling apart, for his digress in the military because he was not progressing the way he wanted to or the way he hoped to. And everything was her fault. Everything was because she left and took the baby with her, that was the reasons why he was acting and having the issues that he was having. And when I looked back into his military records and to his military medical records, he had spoken about depression. He had spoken about death, and he had attempted suicide. He became a substance drug abuser. He and all that led up to him going AWOL. And there was one incident in April after we moved, like I said, where he came to pick up the baby. And I told him, I said, hey, what happened? And again, my husband was present. My husband is ex-military, so he knows. And I said, hey, what happened? Why don't you, if you don't want to be in the military anymore, because this is what my husband did. He did short term and then he did reserves. I said, why don't you go into the reserves and finish off your term, and at least to get the benefits, if not for you, then for the baby. And his answer was, oh, in the position that I was in, I can't do reserves. And I said, oh, really? And so I turned to my husband and I was like, oh, is that true? And he's like, well, I don't know, maybe things have changed or something. But we knew that wasn't true. And jokingly, I said to him, I said, well, you didn't go AWOL or anything, right? Keep in mind, the AWOL incident happened in February, but I did not know. And in April, I made this joke when we saw him. And then afterwards is when I came to find out that, of course, he had gone AWOL and so on and so forth. So I said that jokingly. And again, he just kind of like shrugged it off, like, okay, change the subject. And he went on his merry way. And that was it. That was the end of that. When he left, my husband told me, he said, something is not right. Something is going on, because there is no way, even if his position in the military, no matter how classified or whatever, if he wanted to finish through reserves, he would have been able to do that. They would have just transitioned him into something else. Okay. So again, just blow it off. I really am not thinking anything except that the Friday before the incident, so Mother's Day was May 8th. So this happened May 6th. My daughter calls me and says, Mom, Devin wants to talk, and he doesn't want the baby to be there because he doesn't want the baby to be a distraction. And I said, okay. I told her, she said, can you please watch him for a little bit while I go and have this talk with him? And I told her, I said, Leslie, make sure that you go to a public place. I said, I don't know why, but I just don't feel that something is right. And I would rather you go to a public location. And she said, okay, Mom, she was like, yeah, I'll tell him, to meet up at a restaurant or whatever. And I don't think that ever happened. I think they wound up going back to I don't know if it was to her place or something, but the crazy thing is that evening, I sent her a text message around 9, maybe about 9 p.m. I don't exactly remember what time. And I asked her if she was okay. And there was no reply. And I will tell you, I got so nervous and so scared because I just felt something in my soul, in my being, that was like, he is that person that would be capable of doing something like what he did. I don't know what it was, but it just. And finally, around 10:30 that night, she shows up and she says to me, I said, "Oh, hey, how did the conversation go?" And she's like, "Mom, we're just talking in circles. He just talks in circles. All he talks about is, the military and how they're watching him and listening to his conversations and so on and so forth." And I said, "Leslie," I said, he's got some really severe PTSD. We don't know what caused it, but, I said, and I'm here defending him. And I said to her, I said, just give him a chance. Not necessarily in a relationship aspect, but just give him a chance. He's going through a lot. He just got out. He's probably trying to figure things out. Just be patient with him. And she was like, "I know, Mom." She goes, "It's just, I'm just tired. I'm just tired of listening to the same thing. And he just doesn't understand when I keep telling him, let's just co-parent. And then if things happen down the line, then, And she's like, I still love him, but I really just need to focus on getting into nursing school and doing what I have to do. And he needs to focus on himself. And we just need to co-parent. That's it. We need to just be parents to our child." And I said, okay. And we left it at that. Like I said, Mother's Day comes along. My husband cooks dinner for 3 generations, which is my mom, myself, and our daughter. And it was great. It was a great time. She was with us all day. And come Monday morning, she takes the baby to school. She goes off to work. She calls me and says, "Mom, can you please pick up the baby from school?" I'm like, "Sure, not a problem." I go and I pick him up, bring him back. We're getting dinner ready. And it's funny because at the time, so we closed on our house on May 10th, the day after the incident. And at that time, we were living with Mom until we could get situated into our home. And it kind of became like a little routine where she would come over every night, and either I would pick up the baby from school or my mom would pick her just to help her out, get him bathed and dinner fed and all that ready. And so we would have dinner, and then we would watch Family Feud from 7 to 8. And then at 8 o'clock, the Kelly Clarkson show, which none of us ever cared about, but we would sit and watch it as a family, and then she would leave right after. And she lived less than 10 minutes away, and she would go home and text me, "Hey, I'm home," and whatever. And so anyway, this Monday, she asks me, "Can you please pick him up?" "Sure, not a problem." Bring him back. We have dinner. She comes over. Sorry, backtrack a little bit. Before she leaves her job, she calls me and says, "Mom, Devin wants to know if he can come over and see the baby. Can you please ask Grandma if it's okay?" I said, "Sure." I asked my mom. My mom's like, "Yeah, sure, not a problem. We'll even make extra food for him if he wants to come over and have dinner with us," and so on and so forth. So this is how welcoming we were with him, where he was welcomed in our home. I mean, he stayed in our home. He visited us in Chicago. We never rejected him in any way, despite of whatever may have been happening between them two. And so she arrives, we sit, we have dinner, we're watching Family Feud. And I said to her, I said, "Hey, what happened to Devin? I thought he was coming over." And she says, "Oh, no, he's in his mood," is what she tells me. And I said, "In his mood?" And she's like, "Yeah, I don't know. He's being wishy-washy. He wants to come over, then he doesn't want to come over," and so on and so forth. And I said to her, I said, "Okay, all right. I mean, I'm not going to text him and say, 'Hey, what's going on? Why aren't?'" To me, that's just them too. And so she says to me, she goes, "You know what, Mom?" She goes, "I don't know, I'm not feeling well." And again, like I said, these previous days, she was having her blood pressure issues. And she says, I'm so tired. I'm just going to go home and I'm going to go to bed." I said, okay, baby. I said, just don't forget, just text me when you get home. And my husband and I, like I said, we were getting ready to close on our house the next day. So we had actually taken off the rest of the week. I'm in accounting, and that night was a very, very, very busy night for me. I had many deadlines that I had to meet before I was able to take off for the rest of the week. And I was so focused on what I was doing that I didn't even realize that she hadn't texted me, sent me a text. And so I turned over to I said, hey, by the way, did Leslie send you a text? Because I'm looking at my phone. She hasn't sent me anything, regarding her getting home. And he's like, no, because, that's funny. Yeah, I didn't get anything either. So normally that's what she would do. If she didn't text me, she would text him or my mom or somebody. And so I sent her a text message at 8:37 p.m. saying, hey, are you okay? Did you make it home? And I didn't get anything. I did not get a reply. And about, I would say maybe not even 15 minutes later, my mom comes out of her room yelling and screaming. And my mom, she's, we're all very spiritual, faith-based people. And she was praying in her room. She said that her phone kept ringing and ringing and ringing. And because she didn't recognize the number, she just didn't answer it. But after seeing it 3 or 4 times, she decided to pick it up. And so she answered the phone. And it was his mom and his sister telling my mom that he had killed Leslie and that he was going to kill himself. And she, like I said, she comes out of her room screaming. And my husband and I thought that she was like laughing, like she was caulking at something that she was watching on TV. And I see her face, and her face is beet red. And I said, Mom, what is going on? And all she kept saying is, he killed her, he killed her. And I said, wait, what? What are you talking about? And she says, Leslie, he killed her. He killed Leslie. And we just dropped everything. We jumped in the car. And there's still, when we get in the car, my mom's phone connected to her Bluetooth immediately. And so, we're having a conversation, and I'm like yelling at his mom and his sister. And I'm like, what is going on? What happened? What happened? And, where's the baby? Where's the baby? And his mom and his sister very nonchalantly were like, she's gone. And I said, what do you mean she's gone? And like I said, I mean, I'm just, and she just kept on. They just kept on. He's gone. She's gone. She's gone. And he killed himself. Well, what about the baby? Oh, the baby's there. I could hear the baby screaming in the background. And I said, you're telling me that he did this in front of the baby? Like he saw everything? And they're like, yes. And I said, wait a minute. How did he kill her? Like, what happened? What is going on? I had like 20 million questions. We all had these questions because we had just been with her. And his mom says, oh, he told me he was going to take some flowers to Leslie for Mother's Day. And I said, what are you talking about? He was supposed to come over for dinner and he never showed up. So why, what are you talking about? Like, I need to understand what is going on. And I said, and what did he do? How did he do this? And so his sister says, oh yeah, he has his gun with him and he shot her. And I said, wait, he has his gun? And she says, yeah. And she goes, yeah, let me go back and check. Let me confirm that it's not in the case. And so she I guess she stepped away or whatever and comes back and she's like, oh yeah, no, it's not.
They seem very calm for what's going on.
Yes, exactly. Very calm. And that's where we were kind of like, what's going on here? Because, as a mother, regardless of my child committed the murder or not, I mean, whether my child was the victim or it's just like, how could you be okay? Like, how could you be so calm, And so am yelling, and I'm like, well, get in your car and come, you got to come, we got to see the baby, we got to make sure he's okay, we got to check on him, and so on and so forth. And they kept saying, no, I can't. Well, his mom was like, I can't, I'm too nervous to drive. And I'm like, but you can call the cops, like, you know, call the fire, call somebody. I'm sure you have family, I'm sure you have neighbors, you have Uber, Lyft, like, and I'm just like, at this point, I'm just rambling on because I cannot fully comprehend not only what has happened, but how this person could tell me, hey, I'm not going to go because I'm too nervous to drive. And it's like, are you kidding me? you know? And so, yeah, I even said, well, what about your daughter? I mean, she's old enough, she has her license, like, and her daughter was like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to drive. I'm not going to go over there. And so we get to the apartment complex. Everything is taped off. Everything is, of course, I mean, tons of police. And we're just basically, I mean, I didn't even want to talk to them at that, because I just felt like, how dare you? Like, oh, and I think I was so upset because the fact that he called his mother and said goodbye and said, I did what I did, and now I'm going to do this to myself, with no consideration, remorse, anything. That he has just taken away his son's mother in front of his son. And that now he's going to do this to himself in front of his son. And the only thing that I appreciate about him that night was that he at least had the decency to call 911 and tell them, hey, I've just committed a crime. I've killed someone, and I'm about to kill myself. And my 5-year-old son is here. And somebody needs to come and pick him up. And that's the only part that I'm grateful for, is that he didn't hurt the baby, and that he did not, that he had, like I said, those 2 seconds of reality where he made that call. Police officers, the sheriff's department, Orlando Police Department, everybody, they were just out there, fire department. And they were running around trying to find him because his phone pinged off of another building across the way from hers. And they actually wound up entering the wrong apartment, unfortunately. But they kept searching and searching. And my grandson at 5 years old was so smart that he picked up the phone, and the line was still open. The 911 operator was on the phone. And she told him, she said, can you get to a window and open it? He said, no, the window is, it's tight. It's too hard. It's too hard. And she said, well, what about the door? No, the door, I can't unlock the door. And so, of course, she's asking his name and his age and birthday, just trying to distract him a little bit. And he says to her, she said, oh, well, who's there? And he says, mommy and daddy, but they're dead. And then she said, okay, well, are there any big windows in front of you? And he said, yes, there's the sliding door. And she said, okay, go in front of that and just look outside, just continue to look outside and wave, because the policemen are coming for you. They're going to come help you. And so she just kept, she stayed on the phone with him. And finally, the cops found him waving in the door, in the sliding door. And they broke down the door and they brought him out, and he was completely covered in blood. From what we understand, after some therapy, it's because he threw himself on his mom and was asking her to wake up, to get up. And, of course, it didn't happen. But he described how daddy shot himself. Thankfully, the gun fell in between his father's legs, so that his feet, in a way where the baby would not have been able to pick it up and, God forbid, hurt himself. And so, and then later we came to find out he shot 16 rounds. There were 19 rounds total in the magazine, or there were 18 in the magazine, and then there were 1. And then he shot her 12 times, and shot himself the one time in his head. And it's I wound up getting the pictures because I needed to see everything. I wanted to see what my grandson saw so that I could help him. And as a mother, the curiosity, I wanted to kind of put the puzzle pieces together. I got the 911 calls. I found out later that the 911 operator quit that same night right after the call. She just couldn't take it. It wasn't something that she could handle. And yeah. So like I said, he killed himself. He just, those were his last words, was that he killed her, and he just had no remorse, and he kept telling his mom that, that Leslie was on their side, that Leslie was on the government side, and that she knew that they were watching him, and that she was giving them information in regards to him, and that he could not be without her. And he basically, from what I understand, based on what my grandson has mentioned, he walked into the house saying that he had a surprise for them. He took the gun, pointed it at her, and said, "I will see you in heaven," and shot her. And then he shot her, like I said, a total of 12 times, but he shot her, she collapsed, and then he came around. There was a counter in between. She was in the kitchen about to give medication to the baby because he had been sick. And he came around and shot her an additional 8 times. So 4 times initially, and then an additional 8. And so he wanted her gone. He really wanted her gone. And the only thing, like I said, I'm so grateful that he didn't hurt the baby. He's the best part of her. And my husband and I are now in the process, hopefully soon, of adopting him. And yeah.
Just an awful, awful situation, and just a bleak, retelling of what happened. I can't even imagine being in your shoes and having to deal with all that. And I guess, as you mentioned, if there's any kind of miracle, it's that the baby was unharmed. But who knows? Are you worried about down the road things he's going to remember? If that's going to affect him in negative ways, way down the road?
We do. Of course we do, because after all, he is half her and half him, right? And we just don't know if it's something of genetics, that he's gonna one day get upset and react the same way. And so we do. I mean, it is something we do think about, and it is something that we do talk about. But we have him in therapy. We will continue to have him in therapy. Unfortunately, he will have PTSD for the rest of his life. And I'm in therapy myself. I'm also in quite a few groups. So I'm part of a member of the bereaved survivors of homicide, which is also known as BSH. It's a local chapter here in Orlando, Florida. I'm also part of New Hope for Kids, which is also, it's a great program for him. And what they do is we go every other Tuesday, and he's involved in what they have, these different activities that help them express their feelings and let those feelings of anger, sadness, whatever, whether they're positive or negative, and how to express them. And then there's also within that group, when he's doing his activities, there's an adult group for just for adults that have experienced some type of loss. And so I'm part of that support group. I'm also part of a women's Bible study at our local church, and that has been, of course, a great help to have that support system. My family, I cannot express how much my family, how great, and friends, our friends. I mean, our friends have just been amazing. with him and with us. I mean, just as a family, as the three of us, and as a trio. He's also this past Saturday, there was a camp that's called Camp Healing Hearts, and it's again for children from the ages, I believe, of 5 through the age of 18. They have this camp once a year, and the children go and they have all these different types of activities. And again, it's for them to be able to talk about their feelings and talk about what happened or who they've lost, express how they feel, their anger, their sadness, and all of that. And at the end, they have a bonfire where the kids can write a letter. And if they choose, they can throw the letter burn the letter in the bonfire, or they can keep it, whatever they decide. And we also try to keep him very active. We keep him active. He was in golf for a little bit. We had him in basketball for a little bit. We even have him in pottery. So, swimming, he's really into swimming. He wants to do some competitive swimming. So we're going to be getting him some private lessons to do that. And all we can really do is hope, because we know that this is always going to be on him. And my goal is to speak about this, right? We all want to stop domestic violence, but the reality of it is that it's next to impossible, I feel, to do that, because we would have never expected something like this from him. We didn't really see those red flags as someone that has domestic violence issues or those matters. To us, yes, we saw that he had some issues, mental issues and whatnot, but not to this extreme, not to the point where he would do something like this. And so, in regards to the baby, yes, we're going to continue to get him help. We're going to continue to have him in therapy. We will continue to get him involved. I also hope that if he sees me going out there and speaking about this, that he will use this negative, this tragedy, into something positive. And hopefully he will grow up and be his mother's voice, or even his father's voice, that he can grow up and tell her story and tell his story from what he saw, what he has experienced, and advocate for not only the domestic violence, but also advocate for mental health issues, also advocate for gun violence, also advocate for suicide. This is something he's experienced. And whether I like it or we like it or not, that is his father. And he is going to love his father regardless, right? And he was so proud that his father was a soldier, and he was constantly, my daddy's a soldier, my daddy's a soldier. And when we go to the theme parks and they honor military and veterans, and he stands up as if he's a representation of his father. So I don't want to take that away from him. Is it my choice? Of course not, right? Because I would love for him to just say or forget about him and that's it. But it is the reality. We're not going to take that away from him. And so that's our hope. Our hope is that he gets involved when he gets older, that I can be an example to him where he can say, hey, you know what? If Ita did it, that's what he calls me. It's a short Spanish version of grandma. But if Ita can do this, and she's going out there and she's advocating for mommy, and she's out there telling mommy's story, then I want to follow in her footsteps. And I also want to do the same thing. And so all I can do is pray over him and ask God to give him, to give him that strength and give him that wisdom to be able to do that. And I mean, that's really what it comes down to. He's pretty happy for the most part. I mean, he does have his moments because, of course, he misses his mother, and he spent a lot more time with her than he did with him. So he does tell me, I want to hug mommy, or I miss my mommy, or I want to see her. and things like that. And he does understand that physically she's not here. So I do take him to her burial, to the cemetery, and he cleans the marker, and and it's become like almost like a therapy for him, where when we go, he's prepared. We take the trash bags and we take fresh flowers and we take water, and he wipes it down and he cleans it and he gives her a kiss and he talks and he has a little conversation with her. And sometimes he just wants to lay next to the marker, and so we'll do that. We'll just lay a blanket and lay there and feel the sun. So that's pretty much our hope in regards to
Yeah.
him. Of course, we
And
won't know until he gets older.
yeah, and I mean that's all you can do is just try and take a proactive approach, I guess, for him and for you. The things you're doing to cope and to heal. I guess as we wrap up, the thing I want to ask you is, because this tragedy has touched on so many things: suicide, gun violence, mental health, domestic abuse, so many things intertwined here. Looking back, reflecting on everything that you've been through, this whole experience, what things have you learned that you think you can share with people that are listening that might be in a similar situation or afraid that they're in a similar situation?
I would say to those to be open about it. If they're in a situation, that's one thing that I wish that she would have been more open and more forthcoming about her situation. I think to a certain extent, my daughter was a little naive and just didn't, I don't want to say didn't take it seriously, but I just think that, again, she was just a little naive and just thought like, oh, he's just having his issue, he's just having his moment, but it's going to be over. And I want to put the word out there that it's not just a moment. There is a pattern. And if the pattern continues and the pattern seems to, a pattern is repetitive, if it continues and it's repetitive and consistent, get out, go get the help. There's so many resources out there. And I think that that's the problem, that all these resources are available, but women, more so, not that men do not get domestic violence or domestic abuse, because they do, but more so women, I believe, are ashamed to talk about it, are ashamed to go to their family members and say, hey, this is happening and I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get out of this. Where can I go? What are the resources that are available? Their fear, right? The fear that if they leave, that they're going to be found and that it's going to be worse. Another thing, many of them do not want to leave because of their pets. Pets become like family members, and they don't want to leave them because they're afraid that if they leave, that other person, the spouse, is going to hurt the pet, and they just couldn't handle that. Not knowing where to go. Do they go to the family? Do they go to, a shelter? Or the fear of not having the funds, not having the money. And that's what I want to get. I want to get to a point where it's understood, where it's understood that you don't need money to leave a situation like this. The resources are available. And my hope and my goal is to eventually create a foundation in my daughter's name where I raise enough funds, or we raise enough funds, to help women in these situations, to help men in these situations, to help them get out of it and send them somewhere. If they have to go in hiding, if they need money for food, if they need money to get an apartment and pay, their first month's rent or their security deposit, whatever the case may be, but to get out and be open. Don't be afraid. Don't be ashamed. Be open about this, because we're not here to judge. We shouldn't be judging. And I would rather save one person and know that that person has left a hostile environment than to remain and lose their lives over it, because it's happening way too much. It's happening way, way too much. It's happening on a daily basis. It's almost like it's becoming a trend that, hey, I can't handle you, I'm going to get rid of you. And it's sad. It's sad. This can't continue. There's too many people hurting over these tragedies. And not only the parents of these people that are lost, friends, family members, but the biggest, the most are the children. These children wind up being orphaned because either their mom is dead or their dad is dead, and the mom and dad then commit suicide, or or they go off to prison. And we need to talk about this. We need to talk about domestic violence. We need to talk about mental health issues. We need to talk about suicide. The stigma that, oh, if you have a mental health issue, there's something wrong with you, or you're no good, you're damaged goods. We need to get away from that. We need to get away from that stigma and stereotype. It needs to be known, hey, if you have a mental health issue, we're going to do everything in our power to help you. What do you need? What can we do? What do we need to talk about? If you're in a domestic violence situation, the same thing. What do you need? What can we do? What can we talk about? How can we help you? Are you you're thinking about committing suicide? What is causing this? Do you need to talk to someone? What can we do? And like I said, that's our goal. That's my goal as her mother, is to go out there and help these people that are in this, and to just get out. It's and unfortunately, getting out sometimes means getting out and being gone, almost disappearing, because while they can be found, they're always going to be in danger. And that's what I have discovered with not only my daughter, but with other friends and members that have had, that have lost someone to domestic violence, is that they may have left the situation, they left the home, they left that hostile environment, but they didn't disappear. And as a result, they were found, and their lives were lost. Their lives were taken away.
Well, having the knowledge, the experience that you've been through, as terrible as it is, what you learned and what you're sharing and the advice you have is invaluable to somebody else. And I hope anyone out there listening is going to pick something up from what you've said, and maybe it'll help them with what they're going through or something they're going to go through, and they'll remember what you had to say and what you've gone through. And I just want to say, my condolences to your family. This is just a terrible situation all the way around, and I appreciate coming on the show to discuss the case and what happened. And I wish your family the best going forward.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you once again for joining me for this episode of The Murder of My Family. I'd like to thank Sonny Landon for writing and research assistance in this episode. We'll be back here soon with an all-new episode of The Murder of My Family, and I hope you'll join me for it. But before you go, remember that every murder victim means something to somebody.